1943 in poetry. Nationality words linked to articles with information on the nation's poetry or literature, for instance, Irish or France. Events. September 12, Abraham Sutskever, a Polish Jew writing poetry in Yiddish, escapes the Vilna ghetto with his wife and hides in the forests. Sutskever and fellow Yiddish poet S.H. Merk-Kaczerginski fight against the Nazis as partisans. During the Nazi era, Sutskever writes more than 80 poems, whose manuscripts he manages to save for post-war publication. December, English poet Philip Larkin, having graduated from the University of Oxford. Babai Yar in poetry. Poems are written about the 1941 Babai Yar massacres by Mykola Bazhin of the Communist Party of the Soviet Union. Babai Yar, Sava Holovanovsky, Avram Abraham, and Kievan poet Olga Nikolaevna Anstey Kurilovsky Iry, Kurilov Ravines, another name for Babai Yar. She defects this year from the Soviet Union to the West with her husband. Nazi propaganda minister Joseph Goebbels closes theaters and publishers in Germany. Ezra Pound, still in Italy, is indicted for treason by the United States Attorney General. Canadian poet, critic and editor John Sutherland publishes a review of Patrick Anderson's poetry in his magazine First Statement, a rival to Anderson's preview, which suggests homoerotic themes in his writing, and accuses Anderson of some sexual experience of a kind not normal. Although Anderson would in fact come out as gay later in life, he is married at this time to Peggy Dornbach and threatens to sue. Sutherland prints a retraction in the following issue of his magazine. Ottawa native Elizabeth Smart moves permanently to England. Focus magazine founded in Jamaica. Poetry Scotland magazine founded in Glasgow by Maurice Lindsay. Publication of a new comprehensive edition of Friedrich Holderlin's complete works samplage work. The Gross Stuttgarter Ausgabe begins. Works published in English. Listed by nation where the work was first published and again by the poet's native land, if different, substantially revised works listed separately. Canada. Archibald Lampman, At the Long Salt, edited by Duncan Campbell Scott and E. K. Brown, a selection from Lampman's unpublished manuscripts, posthumous edition. Wilson MacDonald, Greater Poems of the Bible, Metrical Versions, Biblical Forms and Original Poems. E. J. Pratt, Still Life and Other Verse, Toronto, Macmillan. A. J. M. Smith. Toronto, Ryerson Press. Governor-General's Award 1943. Anthologies. Ralph Gustafson, editor, Canadian Poets, published by New Directions. A. J. M. Smith, The Book of Canadian Poetry Anthology Introduction, identified modern poets in Canada as either in the native tradition or the cosmopolitan tradition. Criticism. E. K. Brown on Canadian Poetry. Governor-General's Award 1943. India in English. Sundarrao Ramarao Dongapuri, The Ivory Tower Poetry in English, Baroda, East and West Book House. Punjalal, Lotus Petals Poetry in English, Pondicherry, Sri Aurobindo Ashram. Krishna Shunglu, The Night is Heavy Poetry in English, Lahore, Free India Publications. K.R. Srinivasa Iyengar, Indo-Anglian Literature, A Pioneering Literary History. United Kingdom. Kenneth Allott, The Ventriloquist's Doll. Lillian Bowes Lyon, Evening in Stepney. Cecil Day Lewis, Word Over All. Keith Douglas, Selected Poems. Lawrence Durrell, A Private Country. T.S. Eliot, 4 quartets first collected in U.S. David Gascoigne, Poems 1937–1942. Jeffrey Grigson, Under the Cliff and Other Poems. Michael Hamburger, Friedrich Holderlin, Poems. J. F. Hendry, The Orchestral Mountain. Sidney Keys, The Cruel Solstice. Roy McFadden, Swords and Plowshares, Northern Ireland poet. John Pudney, Beyond This Disregard. Kathleen Raine, Stone and Flower, with drawings by Barbara Hepworth. Caedrich Rees, pen name of William Ronald Rhys Jones, editor, More Poems from the Forces Anthology. William Souter, But the Earth Abideth. Dylan Thomas, New Poems, Welsh. Terence Tiller, The Inward Animal. United States. Leonard Bacon, Day of Fire. Stephen Vincent Bennett, Western Star. Kenneth Fearing, Afternoon of a Pawnbroker. Robert Fitzgerald, A Wreath for the Sea. Langston Hughes, Freedom's Plough. Weldon Keys, The Last Man. Archibald MacLeish, Colloquy for the States. Edna St. Vincent Millay, Collected Lyrics. Kenneth Patchen, Cloth of the Tempest. Carl Sandburg, Homefront Memo. Delmore Schwartz, Genesis, Book 1. Ivor Winters, The Giant Weapon, New Directions. Eleanor Wiley, Last Poems. Other in English. Alan Curnow, Sailing or Drowning, Progressive Publishing Society, New Zealand. Works published in other languages. Listed by nation where the work was first published and again by the poet's native land, if different, substantially revised works listed separately. France. Louis Aragon, Le Musée Grevin. Lanza del Vasto, Le Pèlerinage aux Sources. André Chédid, On the Trails of My Fancy. Robert Desnos, Etat de Vale. Luc Estang, Mr. Prevost. André Frenaud, Les Rois Mages. Anthony Hartley called this book probably the best book of verse published at this time. First edition, revised edition, 1966. Jean Follaine, Usage de Temps. Francis Jams, Elegies et Poesies de Verses. André Pierre de Mandiargues, Dans les années sordides. Jules Supervielle, Poems de la France Malheureuse. Raymond Queneau, Les Zyaux. Indian subcontinent. Including all of the British colonies that later became India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, and Nepal. Listed alphabetically by first name, regardless of surname. Name. Abdul Shakur, Dor Ijadid Ki Kent Muntakab Hindu Shara, short biographical sketches and reviews of Hindu poets in the Urdu language. Acharya Bhagvat, Jivan Ani Sahitya, essays in Marathi, mostly translated from Bengali and Gujarati, including some on which are on Rabindranath Tagore, criticism. Akhtar Imam, Gurdab, Urdu language. Alvantrai Thakur, Navin Kavita Vise Vyakyano, published lectures in Gujarati by this poet and critic on the forms of Gujarati poetry, criticism. Bawa Balwant Jwalamukhai, Punjabi Dr. Bender, Meghajuta. Translation into Kannada from the Sanskrit of Kalidas's Meghajuta. The translation is in a modified Ragale meter, one of the most popular translations of that poet into the Kannada language. D. V. Gundappa, Mankithimana Kaga, Song of Mankutama, Kannada. G. V. Krishna Rao, Kavya Jagatu, on Marxism, Freudian Thought and Indian Poetics, Telugu, criticism. Gauri Shankar Bhadrawahi, Srimad Bhagavad Gita, translation into Dogri Bhadrawahi from the Sanskrit original. Lutif al-Badvi Tazkira al-Lutfi, first volume of a Sindhi language history of Sindhi poetry. See also Volume 2, 1946, Volume 3, 1952. Makhin Lal Chaturvedi, Sahitya Devata, Essays in Literary Criticism, Hindi. Narayan Besbarua, Mahatma Mahaprayanat, Indian, Assamese language. Adhyaya Tar Saptak, groundbreaking Hindi anthology of 7 previously unpublished poets which began the Prayagvad experimentalism movement that, in turn, grew into the Nai Kavita new poetry movement in Hindi poetry. The importance of Tar Saptak to the development of Hindi verse cannot be overstated, according to Ludmila L. Rosenstein. The movement got its name as a derisive term coined by critics who noted the constant use of the word Prayog experimentalism in Adyas's introduction. That introduction and later writings by Adyaya made him one of the chief literary critics in India in the rest of the 20th century. The anthology was reprinted in new editions, with the sixth appearing in 1996. The 7 poets in this edition, Adyaya Gajanan Madhav Muktabad, Shamshir Bahadur Singh, Raghuvir Sahay, Sarveshwar Dale Saxena, Kunwar Narain and Kedarnath Singh. Vijayrai Vaidya, Gujarati Sahityani Rupreka, a Gujarati history of the literature in that language scholarship. Other languages. Cheryl Anwar, Akumi, Indonesian. Odysseus Elates, Son I, Greek. Gerardo Diego, Poemos Adred Purposeful Poems, Spain. Sorley MacLean, Dane Do I'm Here Agus Dane Isle, Scottish Gaelic. Eugenio Monteil, Finisterre, a chapbook of poetry, smuggled into Switzerland by Gianfranco Contini, Lugano, the Collana di Lugano, June 24, 2nd edition, 1945, Florence, Barbara, Italy. Cesar Moro, pen name of Cesar Quispes Asen, Le Chateau de Grisou, Peru. Luis Rosales and Luis Felipe Vivanco. Editors Sonitos a la Piedra Sonnets to Stone, Anthology of Heroic Poetry, Spain. Ol Sarvig, Grand Dict Green Poems, the author's first book of poems, Denmark. Awards and honors. Consultant in poetry to the Library of Congress. Later the post would be called Poet Laureate. Consultant in poetry to the Library of Congress, Alan Tate appointed this year. He would serve until 1943. Frost Medal, Edna St. Vincent Millay. Governor General's Award, Poetry or Drama, News of the Phoenix. A. J. M. Smith, Canada. Births. Death years linked to the corresponding year in poetry article. April 22, Louise Gluck, American Poet Laureate and winner of the 2020 Nobel Prize in Literature. May 11, Michael Palmer, American poet, translator, and winner of 2006 Wallace Stevens Award. June 7, Nikki Giovanni, African-American poet, activist, and author. July 21, Tess Gallagher, American poet, essayist, novelist, and playwright. July 22, Hadi Khorsandi, Iranian poet and satirist. August 14, Alfred Korn, American poet and essayist. September 12, Michael Ondach, Canadian Sri Lankan novelist and poet, whose Booker Prize-winning novel The English Patient is adapted into an Academy Award-winning film. October 2, Franklin Rosemont died 2009. American surrealist poet, labor historian, and co-founder of the Chicago Surrealist Group. December 2, John Balavin, American poet and translator. December 8. James Tate, American poet, educator, man of letters, and a winner of the Pulitzer Prize, National Book Award. Jim Morrison died 1971. American singer, songwriter, poet, best known as the lead singer and lyricist of The Doors. December 9, Michael Kruger, German poet, writer, publisher, and translator. Also, Alan Bold died 1998, Scottish poet. Richard Birengarten, English poet. Emmanuel D. Pasquale, American poet and translator. Vicky Fever, English poet. Hadrawi Mohammed Ibrahim Warsaim, Somalian poet. Trident Mitra, Bengali poet associated with the 1961-1965 Hungryalism or Hungry Generation movement. Robert C. Morgan, American art critic, art historian, curator, poet, and artist. Justo Jorge Padron, Canarian Spanish poet. Ron Smith, Canadian poet, author, playwright, and publisher. Frederick Turner, English poet, critic and academic in the United States, editor of the Kenyan Review. Ellen Bryant Voigt, American poet. Bill Zavatsky, American poet, journalist, jazz pianist, and translator. Deaths. Birth years linked to the corresponding year in poetry article. January 3 F. M. Cornford, 68, born 1874, English classical scholar and poet. January 31 Loaho, 48, born 1894, Taiwanese poet, died in jail. February 27 Kostis Palomas, 84, born 1859, Greek poet. March 10 Lawrence Binion, 72, born 1869, English poet, dramatist, and art scholar. March 13 Stephen Vincent Bennett, 44, born 1898, American poet, heart attack. March 19 Tsugi Takano Yingyi Tsugi, 52, born 1890, Japanese novelist and poet, a woman, surname Takano. April 29 Sidney Keys, 20, born 1922, English poet, killed in action in Tunisia. May 29 Guido Mazzoni, 84, born 1859, Italian poet. August 12 Kurt Eggers, 37, born 1905, Nazi German writer, poet, songwriter, and playwright, killed in action on the Eastern Front. September 13 Sanjayan, pen name of M.R. Nayar, 40, born 1903, Indian, Malayalam language poet and academic. October 7 Radcliffe Hall, 63, English poet and author of the lesbian novel The Well of Loneliness. October 15 William Souter, 45, born 1898, leading poet of the Scottish literary Renaissance. Bedridden from 1930, he died of tuberculosis. October 24 Hector de Saint Denis Garneau, 31, born 1912, Canadian, considered Quebec's first truly modern poet, heart disease. November 22 Lawrence Hart, 48, born 1895, American lyricist. November 24 France Balantic, 21, born 1921, Yugoslav Slovene poet, killed as member of Slovene Home Guard in action against Slovene partisans b. 1921. November 26 Charles G. D. Roberts, 83, born 1860, Canadian poet and writer, known as the father of Canadian poetry because he served as an inspiration for other writers of his time, also known as one of the Confederation poets, together with his cousin Bliss Carman, William Wilfred Campbell, Archibald Lampman, and Duncan Campbell Scott. November 27 Louis Esson, 65, born 1878, Australian poet and playwright. December 2 Drummond Allison, born 1921, English poet, killed in action in Italy. Nordahl Grieg, 41, born 1902, Norwegian poet and author, killed in action over Germany.